Welcome to the Department Chair Leadership Podcast, where the goal is to improve organizations and serve students one leader at a time. I'm your host, Dr. Chris Jochum. If you're a department chair in higher education or any type of educational leader, and you want to improve yourself to better serve and influence those you lead, you've come to the right place. Because the best way to improve an organization is to improve its leader. Let's get started. All right. Well, welcome back, friends, to the Department Chair Leadership Podcast. As always, so thankful that you took the time out of your busy schedule to invest in yourself and those you serve by improving yourself as a leader. Very excited today. First for us in terms of this person's leadership background and journey. So excited to be joined by Miss Julie Nee. Julie is a leader, speaker, trainer, and author. She spent almost 2 decades leading teams and selling chocolate at the Hershey Company. Yes, that one that you're all familiar with, and now spends her life building positive leaders and teams. Julie is a vice president of training for the Jon Gordon Companies and the co-creator of the Power of Positive Leadership and Day of Development training programs with best-selling author and top speaker Jon Gordon. So, Julie, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm thrilled to be here with you. So thank you for having me.
Well, thank you. Just so our listeners know, and I'll probably talk about this in this episode and others, Julie and I recently connected. We were at Human X, Impact and Legacy Summit, focused on community, business, education, and general leadership. If you're not familiar with that, please look that up. It's a great opportunity, probably one of the best leadership conferences I've been to. And Julie was there as one of the featured speakers. And I did not know her, and I went up to her, and she was very gracious to listen to me and agree to be on the podcast. So, Julie, let's just jump right in. You have a very, I'd say, eclectic and interesting leadership background, professional journey. And so let's just start right there. Do you want to talk to our listeners a little bit about, how you ended up where you are now working with Jon Gordon?
Yes, I would love to. So, as you mentioned in the intro, my background is in sales and sales leadership. I spent a couple of decades with the Hershey Company, selling chocolate and leading teams all over the US. And we have this thing inside Hershey, or had this thing inside Hershey. They still do. It's called Hershey in Your Heart. And I definitely had Hershey in my heart, and I still do, and I always will. But there was an inflection point in my career at Hershey that started to put me on this path of leadership and aligning with Jon Gordon. And that was when I joined a new team, and I had gotten a pretty big promotion, and I was leading a big team all over the US. And one of my guys out west, I went out to meet him. He was my direct report, and his extended team, which was my extended team. And as part of that meeting, he had given his whole team a copy of Jon Gordon's book, The Energy Bus. And as I was his boss, so he said, I want to also give this book to you as my new boss, and I want you to read it on your flight home. And I was like, okay, you got it. So I read the book on my flight home, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. Like, I love this. This is how I want to lead my team. This is how everyone should be leading their team. And I sort of started becoming known as the energy bus inside Hershey. And I liked that. Like, I'm a little bit dorky in that way. So I was like, yes, I'd love that. And I was giving the book to a lot of people, and I was using the principles with my team. And here's where it gets really good. What I noticed is my team was able to really thrive, not only when the business was good, but when the chips were down and the business got hard and we weren't making our number, and maybe the company was going through some hard things. And I saw the power of the work, and I was like, wow, this is really impactful. And so I started reaching out to Jon Gordon. I wrote him an email. That's how it all started. I said, thank you for the energy bus. It made such a huge impact on my team. I so appreciate your work. He responded. So I was like, wow, that's cool. So I read another book, and I wrote another email, and I read another book, and I wrote another email. And then I was like, oh my gosh, I need to meet this guy. So I live in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I am part of this executive women's group here. And so I put on the table, hey, I'd like to have this gentleman, Jon Gordon, come speak at our upcoming leadership event. This was back in 2014. And he got approved as the speaker. So I volunteered to introduce him. And I introduced Jon. It was a group of about 300 to 250, 300 people, mostly women, but some men too. I introduced Jon, and then he got on the stage and he goes, I think Julie's more passionate about my work than I am. And I was like, yes, I am. And so it was just, that was kind of the beginning. So that was March of 2014. And then that whole year, I was like, by this point, now I've read 3 books, I've met him in person, I'm totally sold. So I'm building the relationship, keeping the lines of communication open that year. And I'm talking to my husband, like the Jon Gordon thing, the Jon Gordon thing, the Jon Gordon thing, but I'm still doing my thing at Hershey, right? I'm grinding and traveling and working and doing all the things. And in December of that year, 2014, I said to my husband, or no, he said to me, what is this Jon Gordon thing? Like, why do you keep talking about this Jon Gordon thing? I said, oh, I'm going to be working with him next year. And he said, does he know that? And I was like, excellent point, honey. So I wrote him one more email and I said, top 5 reasons why we should work together in 2015. And a couple of days later, he called and I was so surprised. But he called and I was like literally in the craziest setting. I was at the YMCA walking around the track with my son while my daughter's at basketball practice. I don't have a pen or paper or anything. He calls and I see the number and I'm like, oh my gosh, Jacksonville, Florida, this is going to be Jon Gordon. It's so loud everywhere. And I was like, oh my gosh. And he starts asking me all these questions like, what do you want to do with this? And I said, I want to speak about the energy bus. Like I just was so passionate at that time. It was just the energy bus. I want to speak about the energy bus. And he said, how much money do you make? And he's asking me all these questions and I'm giving him the answers. And by the end of the call, it was about 30 minutes. He goes, okay, you can go out and speak about the energy bus for free before you quit your day job. And if you really like it, then, we'll have more conversations. And he's like, I'll give you the tools and I'll tell you what to do and the structure and all the things, and you can go do it. And so I was like, okay, I'm in. So I started speaking for free about the energy bus, and I would go to junior leagues and Rotary clubs and women's groups and really anyone who would listen. And I would deliver these talks about the energy bus. And after about 6 months of that, I was like, this is it. Like, I love this. Like the seed that had been planted when my teammate out out west had given me the book and asked me to read it, that seed that had been planted was growing. And I was like, it's time to go. So in the fall of 2015, I left Hershey and I jumped into this adventure with Jon. And it started out honestly just very small, very minute income, very small talks, very small clients, very small money at the very beginning. And it started there. And I just kept delivering more and more talks. And then clients would say, you know what, I want to talk about when in the locker room. I want a workshop on training camp. I want something on soup. I want, and just like clients kept asking for all the things. And so I started creating a bunch of workshops and keynote decks and all these things. And then after a few years, clients were asking for training. And I was like, Jon, we need to create a training on the power of positive leadership. He's like, nope, we're not ready yet. We're not ready yet. We're not ready yet. But after a couple of years of talking to him about that and clients continuing to ask, he was like, okay, we can build it. And so in 2018, we built a full day power of positive leadership training together. And we did a soft launch in 2018 fall, and then we did a hard launch in 2019. And we started delivering publicly together these full day trainings on the power of positive leadership, and then also starting to train trainers. So then I started training others to do the work. So I was training trainers on the power of positive leadership. And then since 2019, I mean, obviously we had a little blip with the pandemic in 2020 and 2021, but since 2019, really, we have been building up a pretty significant content library around. We built a full day training around the power of a positive team. Also, now we have keynotes and workshops around energy bus, the power of positive leadership, the power of a positive team, and we're certifying trainers all over the place to go out and deliver the work, because really Jon's mission is about creating a more positive world. So the more people we can train and expose to the work and have them out sharing the work, one person at a time, we're going to be creating a more positive world. So I know that's a very long answer to a short question, but really it's been a journey over the last 8.5 years, and it just keeps growing. The vision was so small at the beginning of just speaking about the energy bus, and it has become so much more over time. And really, the majority of the work that I do now is workshops and trainings with clients. I do a lot. I do keynotes, but I do a lot of workshops and trainings, and I love that part because of the two-way interaction and really getting to hear the brilliance in the room from our clients. And it's just cool. So that's been the journey. Oh, and also I have written a couple of books in the last couple of years too.
Well, yeah, you certainly keep busy. And I think my background, I started as a public school teacher. And so I understand that it's fulfilling anytime you're in front of a group of people and you're teaching them something and interacting. It's really hard to replicate that in, outside of a classroom setting. And so I certainly understand that. Wow, so much to talk about and unpack here, Julie. One thing that I would be interested in knowing, because you said the energy bus, and if people are listening to this and they are a leadership connoisseur and they don't know the leadership bus, you need to read that. Hopefully you know who Jon Gordon is. I've been, the two Johns in the leadership space that really have influenced me are Jon Gordon and John Maxwell.
Of course.
And so I understand what it's like to maybe on a smaller scale read something and just say, that really resonates. I'm going to infuse some of that into my leadership. What have you found, whether it's with the 10 principles in the energy bus or more recently the power of positive leadership? What have you found are some of the either common questions, concerns, or needs that people have, leaders have? And I know you work with them from all areas, but are you able, is it possible to identify right now what are some of the common themes in terms of what people need because of either the world we're living in or the market they're working with? But what are some of those things that people ask you to talk about that really resonate?
I think the biggest piece that people really struggle with is negativity and negative people and negative cultures. I mean, all the things around negativity. I have spoken with so many clients, both individually and as teams and organizations, and what we call energy vampires are literally sucking the life out of them. And they're going into work every day with this unbelievable level of tension and stress, and it's impacting their mental health. And very importantly, they're not doing their best work. There's a lot of research about the impact of negativity in the workplace and what happens when people are experiencing that. And there's a statistic, it kind of follows down. There's a bunch of little data points in there, but the one that really stuck with me is that 48% of people intentionally decrease their work effort when they are working and living in a negative environment. And if you think about that, these people are getting paid a direct deposit and benefits and have a certain set of standards and expectations, and yet they're intentionally decreasing their work effort because of the negative environment that they work in. And it's so much more prevalent than I ever realized before I started doing this work. Because I think for me, I'm very naturally positive, and I tend to I am positive myself. I try to surround myself with positive people. And when you do this work for a really long time, you almost forget how bad it is in certain environments. And then our clients remind us all the time that it is really bad for some people. And those negative cultures can be so toxic. So we have to be really intentional about creating our cultures, because our cultures are being created. And this goes for a university, an elementary school, like you mentioned, where you started, a big corporation, a small business, a family business. It goes for everyone. It's being created, whether we are intentionally creating it or not, because with culture, it's not one thing, it's everything. It's every good morning, it's every how are you doing? It's every can I help you with this project? It's every tense and tone in emails and texts, and it's every how do we run the meeting? Who sits with who? How are we doing clicks? It's everything. Culture is every little thing that we do, and we have to make a decision that we're not going to allow negativity to sabotage our teams and our cultures. And when we make that decision, what that means is we're making a commitment that when negativity comes our way, whether it's an energy vampire, again, those are our words, someone who totally sucks the life out of the room, the Zoom room, the Teams room, the meeting room, the boardroom, the classroom, that we're going to address that. Same goes for complaining. We're going to address complaining inside of our organizations, but we have to make a commitment to not do nothing, not let that person just be who they are and sit over there, because one person cannot make a team, but one person can break a team with their negativity. So we have to be willing to address it. And I think that, I mean, there's so many things. I mean, of course we can talk about all the things. There are so many things, but I think if you talk about kind of that biggest pinch point, it's culture building, trying to build a positive culture, right? But also in that culture building, really being able to address and remove that negativity from organizations.
Well, couldn't agree more. And I think we're on the same wavelength there. It kind of energized me listening to how you would describe that, because in my own work and the book that I have on department chair leadership, I have a few chapters dedicated to culture, and I say it's like a swimming pool. There's no such thing as an unclean and a clean part of the pool. We all swim in that. And the minute we step into an organization, we both affect and are affected by the culture, even if, like you said, we do nothing. And I can assure you, as a lot of our listeners know, whether it's higher ed, the K-12 space, culture and climate also is a big concern, because, as you said, a lot of employee engagement is tied to the culture, tied to the leader. Gallup has a poll that consistently says, 75 to 80% of employee engagement is due to the leader, the manager, the culture. And so I really appreciate you sharing that, because if somebody is here listening to this and they think, oh, nobody else struggles with this, it's everywhere. So if you met one of our listeners at a conference or briefly on an airplane, and you just had to give the brief elevator pitch, if I'm a struggling leader or a struggling team member, what's one or two things that I can do, either as a leader to affect a positive culture, or even as a team member, just to at least the world I live in and the space I control? What are some things that you would tell people?
Honestly, I think the biggest piece is going to be right here. And it starts with this. If you don't have it, you can't share it. And when I say it, I mean optimism, positivity, and belief. So if you're trying to create a positive culture, if you're trying to be a positive leader, if you're trying to be a positive team together, if you don't have that optimism, positivity, and belief inside you, you can't infect others with it. You can't pass it on to others. And part of that is around stress and burnout. If we're not taking care of ourselves, if we're letting ourselves get fully tired, drained, and depleted, how in the world do we think that we can pour into others? So just knowing that, and I think we all actually know that fundamentally, because we've all heard some version of put your oxygen mask on first, you can't pour from an empty cup, all the things. Like, this is not revolutionary, right? We all know it. It's a matter of doing it. How do we find a way to intentionally fill ourselves back up? And we have a lot of tools inside our work on how to do that. We talk about a formula called E plus P equals O, which is events plus, which we can't control, plus our perspective, or our positive perspective, equals the outcome. And that's much too long to kind of get into more of that for this conversation. But there are lots of ways to feed and fuel ourselves. Gratitude is one of the biggest ones. And when you Google, and you may have already done this, Chris, but when you Google the benefits of gratitude, you will get at least 101 million results. So this is not fluffy stuff. When people are hearing about gratitude all over the place, the reason we're all hearing about it all the time is because it is scientifically proven to change our brain structure. When we practice gratitude regularly, we can train our minds to have more of a default position that is grateful. The more you practice it, the more those connections inside your brain get stronger, and you will default to see the good around you. So we have to really be intentional about looking for and seeing the good. And I think sometimes we as humans and leaders and business colleagues and whatever, we think it has to be huge things. We think it has to be like the big win, or we finish the big goal, or we close that big deal, or we had this huge impact on student achievement, or whatever it is. It doesn't have to be huge things. Noticing the small things that are happening along the way is really what's going to help continue to fuel us. And I would say probably the last one on this, without taking too long, is we have to be mindful about the way we speak to ourselves. And we have to do what we call talking to ourselves instead of listening to ourselves. Instead of listening to all the negative reels and all the thoughts that are popping in our brains all the time that are not usually super positive and kind, we need to kind of stop those thoughts in their tracks and replace it with positive self-talk. I'm going to talk to myself and give myself positive, affirming language instead of beating myself up. So, those are just a couple of ways to start filling our cup and charging our batteries up a little bit so we have something to give to the people around us.
Well, Julie, one thing that you mentioned there, and you also touched on this in your introduction, and I know this would be valuable to a lot of our listeners, is you said early on in your career at Hershey, or at one time, obviously numbers were important, and as you could probably guess, in the world that I live in, higher education, numbers are important in terms of enrollment and things like that. But I also know from listening to you speak and some other great takeaways from that conference, and I always say that we have to put, morale before metrics, and people before processes and all of that. So, how do you respond? Because I'm sure you've been in that meeting with the CEO or some type of leader where they are just, we need to improve by 4%, and that's what they're looking at. Maybe I'm off, but how do you go about that? Because I'm pretty confident that before I look at improving metrics, I need to see how are we behaving, how do we get along, what are the core values that we're going to live out that create the habits, et cetera.
Exactly.
You're much more well versed and experienced than I am in that. So what are your thoughts on that? If somebody calls you and says, "Julie, you're a consultant. I have got to improve X by 3%. Help me improve the numbers." How do you respond?
So, here's the truth. We have to have goals and targets and a vision and metrics. I mean, that is, of course, we measure ourselves on those. The world measures us on those. So of course we have to have those targets. It's really about how you get there. And by the way, when you were talking about the numbers and talking about the numbers all the time, it made me think about at Hershey. Like, of course, I was a sales leader and a salesperson. Of course, we had targets and we were measured on those and we were bonused on those. And every single day, we got something called the daily flash. And the daily flash was something that would be in your email by 7:30 every morning, and it showed how your numbers changed from yesterday to today, by the month, by the quarter, by the year. So if you thought we were not looking at numbers, we were looking at numbers. But here's the thing, it's how you get to the numbers. And so inside Jon Gordon's work, we talk about this idea of the root and the fruit. So the root system of a tree, that's your culture, that's your people and your processes. The fruit, of course, is the numbers. It's the flash, it's the student achievement, it's the admittance and all the things, right? It's all the things that the world measures us on. But here's the key. If you focus only on the fruit, only on the outcomes all the time, and it's just grinding and pushing, and you got to hit the number, and you got to hit the number, and you got to hit the number, and you ignore the root system, which is your culture, your people, and your processes. The root system is the culture. If you ignore that, you may have great fruit for a little while, but eventually that root system is going to die, and you're not going to have that abundant supply of fruit that you really want. So the idea is invest in the roots. What does that look like? What is the water and the sunshine and the fertilizer that you're going to pour into your roots, which is your culture? And how is the outcome, how are the outcomes going to be the byproduct of the investment in the culture? And that's really what it is. And people think, well, gosh, if I spend all my time on culture and I'm taking my eye off the ball, I'm taking my eye off the number. But you're really not. That investment in your culture, your people, and your processes, that's going to deliver you that long term byproduct of a great supply of fruit. So it's really in the how and what you're focusing on.
Can see each other as we record this, and I was nodding affirmatively because that really energizes me, and I hope that resonated and will ultimately add value to people that listen. And I really appreciate you, of all people, Julie, saying you worked in a business where every morning, right? You got your numbers.
Yes.
I can't speak for my other colleagues in higher ed, but numbers are important. But I don't know that I get an email every morning that tells me where certain numbers are. But even within that culture that is driven by that, and your bonuses and evaluations are based. I love that analogy of the fruit and the root, because anyone with an agricultural background knows that you might have one great harvest, but if you don't do all of the other things outside of harvest season, you're done. And I really appreciate that. So I want to also talk about the great things that you continue to do. You have two books: Mirror, Mirror, Five Reflections to Clear the Fog and Help You Shine, and You Grow Girl, Plant and Pursue the Power of You. Love those titles. I'm going to put the links to those in the show notes, and just talk about those books and how things are going.
Yes, I would love to. Thank you. It's really cool because in my journey with Jon Gordon and our whole team over the last 8.5 years, I've spent a lot of time around a lot of authors. And for a few years, I thought, gosh, I really do. I think I might have something to say, right? Something to write about. And I talked about it for a few years before I actually did anything about it. And finally, I did it. And Mirror Mirror launched in 2023. And I'm just so proud of it. I wasn't going out to try to be Jon Gordon or be some huge best-selling author. I feel like it's a compelling message. And it's really about what we often perceive in the mirror. We look in our mirrors and we see distortion, we see lack, we don't have joy. We look in our mirrors and we say terrible things to ourselves. We don't see the greatness that's inside us. And so there's a structure inside the book. The reason I say removing the fog, I really want you and others to think about this idea of when we get out of the shower and our mirror's all fogged up, right? And that's kind of what we see about ourselves sometimes. And so when I envision wiping away that fog, the FOG in fog is forgetting our greatness, right? We forget our greatness when we see that distorted mirror. So, how do we wipe away the fog and really learn to shine our light on the world? It's a dark world. And we need to find a way to shine our light so we can, one person at a time with our own lights, ignite the light inside of others. So the word shine also is the structure of the book. And so anyway, I'm just really proud of it. And I love sharing it with people because I think it resonates and I think it has a message that makes sense. And that's really for me what a book is about. It's about being in service to others. It's not about my own ego and look at me and look at my book. It's about how can this potentially help others? And I share real stories in the book about some challenges that I've had and how I overcame them through some of the tactics that are shared in the book. So really excited about that. And then this year, with my colleague Amy P. Kelly, we do a lot of the Jon Gordon content creation together. And so we've been working together for years, and we call each other Zoom mates because we spend so much time together on Zoom and we've created so much content for Jon. We had an idea last year to create this concept called You Grow Girl. And it's so much more than currently it's a book and a journal, but it's really so much more than that. We're trying to create a community of women of all ages and stages that can live into their full potential. So we had the idea for a You Grow Girl journal. That was actually the original idea. And when we told Jon Gordon about it, he was like, you need to write the book first. And so all of a sudden we were like, I guess we're writing a book. So we actually just grinded and worked so hard last year and into this year because we wanted to launch the You Grow Girl book and journal on International Women's Day because that day has so much significance. So we really made it happen. And so You Grow Girl, the book and journal, launched on International Women's Day this year. And really just proud of both of those books because they're all about growing and empowering and helping people get better. And if you should you ever read Mirror Mirror, or any of your audience read Mirror Mirror, you'll see in there that I am kind of a personal development junkie. So that obviously comes through in my writing, because I love to grow and I love to learn, and I want to help others do the same.
Well, definitely. I promise you, people listening will read this, and even in my network, going to share that. What are some of the other things here? We maybe get to the end of the podcast. Some other things that you're either working on or hope to launch, and what does life look like for you moving forward?
It's funny that you asked that, because Amy and I were just discussing that this morning, and we decided no more books right now. I have two in the last 2 years, and really now it's about building the foundation and really strengthening the roots, like we talked about, especially for You Grow Girl, as we continue to build that. Like I said, it's much more than a book and a journal. It's a community. We have a community on Instagram. It's at You Grow Girl Community. And we are doing Zooms with any women who want to come to our Let's Grow Together sessions that we're doing on kind of once a month on Sunday or Monday evenings. And we really just, the next step is building the community really around this, and being able to serve more women with the message. So building up You Grow Girl. And of course, I want to continue to speak about Mirror Mirror and continue to do the work with Jon. It's very cool how it kind of grew over time, because for a very long time it was all Jon Gordon all the time, and doing his work. But now that I have some of my own intellectual property, now I can speak and share and teach about my own ideas. And so it's cool to be able to do both of those things.
I can attest for our listeners that Julie's the real deal, a great presenter, says a lot, honestly, about your, I guess, character and personality that we had never met before. And I had approached you, and we were talking a little bit about your session and your willingness and generosity to be on this podcast and really speak into and add value to our listeners, because leadership is leadership, as you know. We might lead in different areas, different industries, but professional development, if you're in a leadership role and you're not working on yourself on all aspects, physically, your leadership development, emotionally, I don't think you won't reach your full potential. And so in my world, we always say a good teacher is a good thief. And because we beg, borrow, and steal ideas for the classroom. And I've taken a similar approach to both training leaders and kind of my own development, is let's look at all the areas. And so there are things, I don't care if you're in higher education, if you're a principal, a superintendent, I promise you that in Julie's work, in the books that she has out, and I do think in the future you will have more. I believe that, because I know you have a lot more books in you that people need to read. So Julie, again, I just really, really thank you for taking the time to be on this podcast, to speak into the lives of those that are listening. And I guess just any final thoughts or words as we close out.
First of all, you're so welcome. I love podcasts, and I love getting to talk and engage with people. So thank you for having me. I think I'm just going to leave you with, and the audience, with this. Pick one thing that you heard today during this conversation, or actually one thing that's just in your line of sight during your workday or your work week. Did you see a quote that you loved? Did you listen to a podcast that you loved? Did you read a book, or are you reading a book that you love? Whatever it is that you're learning about currently, pick one thing and put it into action. Because I think a lot of times, especially people who love to consume leadership content like I do, I mean, I love to consume it. For many years, I just consumed it and consumed it and consumed it and filled journals and journals and journals of notes and all things, but I didn't really put it into practice. And when my life started really changing is when I actually put the things I was listening to and learning into practice. So you don't have to do all the things. I mean, I have books and books and books of notebooks, and in all the years, I couldn't put all the things into practice. But for anyone listening, pick one thing and just start with one thing and see how that starts to change you and the people around you. Then add another thing, then add another thing, but take action. That's really the ask, is take some kind of action on the things that you're learning and the things that you're inspired by that fuel you and give you energy.
Perfect advice. Yeah, pick one thing. Just do it, create momentum, get started. Before you know it, a few years will have passed and you've done 5 great things that have built upon each other. So great advice that I certainly would echo. So again, thank you to Julie Nee. Thank you to our listeners. As always, really appreciate you taking the time to invest in yourself and those you serve by developing yourself as a leader. I wish you well, and we'll see you all next time. Thank you for listening to the Department Chair Leadership Podcast. If you want to learn more about my leadership philosophy and how to be an effective chair, please consider my book, The Department Chair, A Practical Guide to Effective Leadership. You can find this and learn more about me by going to cjleadership.com. Also, please be sure to like this podcast, leave a review, and share with your colleagues. Thanks again for improving your organization and those you serve by improving yourself. Take care.